I am delighted to be moderating this panel, because this is where the rubber meets the road. Many of the criticisms about our industry stem from this part of what we do in mining. But at the same time, thanks to the work and your contributions, the contribution of the members of this panel, we are seeing what was a problem or waste as a potential solution and a new repurposing in terms of where do we go forward. And this new approach will change our view with regards to all future mines as well. We have 50 minutes. We are perennially running out of time at the LIAMforum. I wish we had 2 hours per panel, but we don't. So we have the following speakers, and what I will do is I'll read your names. After I read your names, I'll ask you to each introduce yourself for about a minute, saying why you're here, what brought you here, 1 or 2 minutes each. As young people, what drove you to, how did you end up here? What did you go wrong, right? And that's one way of putting it. And so we have Kelly Welly Martin, who studied at Brock. She has a PhD. She's a senior consultant at ERM. We have Alex Hoots, who is Director of Closure and Rehabilitation at Agnico Eagle. We have Tapiwa Chimganda, who is at the Minerals to Metals at the University of Cape Town. We have Shilpa Ramjeet, who is at the Center of Bioprocess Engineering Research, also at the University of Cape Town. And we have Charles Dumarec, who is Vice President of Science and Environmental Management at the Mining Association of Canada. So with that, I'm going to give the microphone to Alex to speak about herself, followed by Kelly, then Tapiwa Shilpa, and finally Charles. And after that, Alex, each of you will have about 7 or 8 minutes to speak on your topic, and then we'll gather at the end to have an open conversation. So, Alex.
Yeah, I'm, as Raziel said, I'm Alex Hood, and I'm the Director of Closure and Legacy for Agnico Eagle. And the main reason for me participating, Raziel had reached out to Agnico to see if one of us would be interested in participating. And I know there's a few other people from Agnico that are. And, you know, the forum itself is very close to my heart. I think it's really hard for young people to to know, I guess, what you want to do when you grow up. And I think I'm still figuring it out. I'm going to not tell you how I got here, because I do have a slide in my presentation for it, but very, very happy to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly?
Hello, everyone. And to Alex's point, I'm just delighted to be here. I did study up many years ago, is where I got my undergraduate degree. And I was just delighted to hear I may have an opportunity to speak to all the upcoming bright minds about how my path since that time has led me to become a geochemical consultant for the mining sector. And Alex, I have a slide where I'll go into that kind of meandering pathway a little bit in more detail. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Tapiwa, please.
So Rachel, Tapiwa is currently experiencing load shedding, and she's trying very hard to join.
Oh,
so
sorry, Shilpa.
Okay, so I'll just speak, and then if she joins, she can do her little introduction. So briefly on me, I am Shilpa Ramjeet, and I am actually from Mauritius, a small island in the Indian Ocean. And I actually came to Cape Town to do chemical engineering, and then I did my specialization in bioprocess engineering. So I am actually not your typical mining professional, because my work generally revolves around circular economy, but through my research center, I had the opportunity to participate in a really exciting regenerative agriculture project, which me and Tapiwa will talk a little bit more about later. And this is how I came into mining, trying to bring in the concept of circular economy, resource efficiency, and biorefineries to mining professionals, and then actually understand how we can use these at the core of engineering design and help to support a post-mine development and economy also. I'm actually a research coordinator at my center, and I do a mixture of research and project management. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Charles?
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here. And I think like the others, I think, being able to speak about what I do and kind of the somewhat accidental pathway by which I got to where I am, I think is important because it kind of highlights that a lot of us don't really know what we want to be when we grow up. When I started with Environment Canada almost 30 years ago, I said what I wanted to be when I grew up was retired. I'm slowly getting my way there, but I'm not retired yet. But I'll, like the others, I'll address that circuitous pathway a little more in my slides.
This is really wonderful. So with that, Alex, can you please launch on your presentation?
All right, so I'm kind of kicking off the session to talk about what we're doing in the mining space in order to try and incorporate climate change into our plants. And as everyone knows, it's something that is a very major issue across industries and countries, and I think we're all in this space right now of trying to do our best to figure out how we can make global change. And so with that, I'll get you to flip the slide, Virginia. So really there's two types of climate risk. There's the transition risk. So it's, the various risks that come out of us moving to this low carbon economy, stuff like changes in policies and regulations. And then the other side of it is the physical. So that's extreme weather, flooding and drought, and increasing in frequency and severity of these events. So I'm really going to focus, because I do have a short amount of time, on the physical side of things. And so over to you again, Virginia. Perfect. So in terms of physical risk vulnerability, physical climate risk is the potential impact of things like weather and climatic events due to climate change, and how it impacts companies, government, various different institutions, and really how we're working to calculate it, or the standard way that we do it is looking at how the combination of a hazard and then the exposure leaves us vulnerable to facing this hazard, right? So it's looking at the order of magnitude that the event could cause. And I'll just get you to flip to the next one, and then I'll go into it. So the main physical risk hazards that we're looking at in closure. So at this point, there's so many unknowns for us in trying to understand what we need to plan for in closure. And I think things like understanding the changes in temperature are something that's harder to model and define and understand the impacts. But there are things like, rain flooding, heat and cold stress, extreme weather, drought, and wildfires that we can design our structures for. So with all mines, there's various different components on the site that are going to be staying there in perpetuity. So it could be something like, mined out pits, or it could be a tailings facility. And really what our job is to make sure that that facility is able to withstand whatever Earth is going to throw at it. And so in the past, when we were designing these structures, we used to really focus on, that 1 in 100 year event. So what is the worst rain that you could get in that time span? And I think what we've moved on, and one of the ways we're trying to kind of climate change proof ourselves as industry is, looking at more of the 1 in 1,000 events. So looking at a much larger record in order to understand what we might intersect during the future while the facilities exist, and also raising our safety of factors. So, faculty of safety. So it means things like, armoring the slopes of facilities differently. It's having gentler slopes and stuff like that. And I think that's really the best way that we can plan at this point for the future, knowing that there's going to be changes and we're not really sure which way they're going to go. So next slide, please, Virginia. So there's just kind of going over the various different impact chains. So as we know, climate change could cause sea levels to rise, changes in rainfall and temperature patterns. It could be the probability and severance of some of the hazardous events. So there are times when we look at events that haven't happened in a very long time and test the facilities against that. So, what happens if we actually get an earthquake? and look at the different magnitudes, knowing that maybe that hasn't ever happened, but that it could happen in the future, right? And I think with the number of issues globally related to, failing dams and tailings facilities in some countries, I think that becomes even more important, because you really want to make sure that you're preventing this from happening. And I think that, and I'm sure Charles will get into it, is definitely something that's really important to industry to, close facilities and know that you're leaving them when they're chemically and physically safe. So next slide. So when we're talking about adaptive capacity, I just came up with a list of questions that we might ask ourselves as industry. So I think the 5 key areas that we look at is, culture and leadership. How do we as a company, do we have a strong risk culture? What do we need to do? And who are we talking to about it? There's the managerial risks. So, how we incorporate it in our management systems, and, what KPIs are we using for closure? And then we've also got things like operational. So, have we planned for something to happen? And if that happens, do we know where we're going to go? And so often that's in things like emergency response plans. And then there's the financial component of, do we have money if something happens, to make sure that people and wildlife and water bodies are protected. And I think that that's your final kind of layer in risk management, just if there is an event that you could have never predicted. And I think that that's fairly few and far between with design nowadays, but it is that last line of defense, like having a hard hat almost. And then there's the technical side of things, is, rigorously testing and having the right people look at your designs and say, are they the best? Will they withstand it? And having that third party opinion, I think is really important in helping us build this resilience in climate change. So next slide. So my very last slide is how did I get here and why mining? So graduating from high school, and as you can see, I love nature. And so I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be, and once I was told I couldn't be a cheerleader when I grow up, I started just looking at what do I enjoy. And to me, the thing that just made me so happy was just being in nature, looking at animals, and hanging out with friends in the woods. So because of that, I applied on a number of different environmental science programs, knowing that I had no idea what I wanted to do. But if you start with something that you love and that you can figure out a little bit as you go. And so through that process, I kind of was testing it out a little bit, and I did co-ops, and I thought I wanted to be a teacher and do environmental science teaching. And I found out I didn't love working with children. I worked for the government, and decided the work that I was doing maybe wasn't for me. And all this led me to realizing that I really wanted to do research with animals. And when I graduated from university, I went and worked for the government up in the Arctic. And I fell in love with the Arctic. And, changes to regulations happened. And I was worried that something might happen with my job, and I wanted to stay in the North. The North was kind of my place. And so I was applying on absolutely everything. And in that, I got an interview to work as a permitting person for a mining company. And, I was kind of hesitant about it. Like, why would I want to work in mining? And why is this where I want to go? And, I started there, and I think I kind of found my place. And for me, what I love about mining is there's so many opportunities to learn and grow. And to me, influencing things from the inside is so important, right? And I feel like I can influence what we do and the policies that we have, and leave that lasting legacy for people. And I'm pretty sure I'm a mining lifer now. And I think if you had told this girl when I graduated high school that that's where I'd become, I would not have predicted it, similar to Charles. But I can't imagine doing anything else. So very short intro to mining and climate change and who I am, but yeah, I'll pass it off back to Raziel.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I tell you, I'm getting the forum is terrific. People are opening up and telling it as it is, heart to heart. And I hope we're connecting with young kids all over the place. Next is Kelly.
So I'll work a little bit backwards from just showed, and what I wanted to start with was my time at Brock. So when I first started at Brock, I began as a biology major. I took a couple of science courses and absolutely fell in love with earth science. And what really struck me was really seeing this planet for all its complexity, 4.6 billion years of history. What does life look like when it evolved there? And then, of course, you can't study earth science without having conversations about mining. And I knew, as much as I loved earth science, that my role in the mining industry was not going to be probably on the exploration side. In fact, I was fascinated by the environmental footprint it had. I also, because I did biology and earth science, had a full identity crisis and could never commit myself to any particular discipline. And so then I moved on to do a master's in environmental chemistry, where I was looking at a legacy site out in Nova Scotia. I looked at the historical gold mining implications to local invertebrates. I studied that for 2 years. I then did it to myself again and said, I want to pivot. And then I went to McMaster for my PhD in organic geochemistry. And there I got to study arsenic in groundwaters in Bangladesh. And every time I did this, I was learning a new discipline under real giants, I would argue, in the scientific world. And this sort of ended up being a theme that we all stand on the shoulder of giants, great mentors, and it just kept leading me to this idea that environmental science has to be multidisciplinary. So then I spent 5 years at the University of Toronto in the Mine, Water, and Environment Lab, and I started learning microbial genomics. And after that time, I found a place at ERM. And at ERM, I work as a biogeochemical consultant, primarily for the mining industry. And why, for me, all of those things started making sense is because as I work with mining clients on a day-to-day basis, and we talk about water resources, and we talk about waste rock management, my time studying and researching in earth sciences and in microbial genomics, and by really well-versed analytical chemists, all start to make sense and it started to come together. And I draw from all of those wonderful experiences every single day. And so we know that the mining sector really globally uses a vast amount of fresh water in processing. We know it has impacts to that fresh water. And then on the flip side, we know we're in a world where the global demand on fresh water is increasing every single day. And so we're at a really interesting cusp as an industry because we now have an opportunity to be these really innovative water stewards as long as we come at it with this holistic lens. Now, my background, I was fortunate enough to be able to study across disciplines, but really this lends itself to so many roundtable discussions and other disciplines where people who are geotechnical engineers or aquatic biologists or toxicologists are really integrating those backgrounds, and we're having those discussions from the moment we want to even break ground in exploration right through to closure. The conversation is changing. It's fascinating to be a part of. And I'm just going to touch on this for a moment because it's not a conversation I have every single day. And I think it's a really unique aspect of the work I get to do, and I feel very fortunate to do. This is new to the mining world, that every mining site is absolutely teeming with microbial life. I didn't like undergraduate microbiology. I didn't take it, actually. And in fact, I didn't fall into it probably until about 6 years later when it came up to environmental geochemical questions that I couldn't answer with an abiotic lens. My hand was sort of forced. I had to start looking into this world. And what I found was that the mining microbiome is one of the most fascinating things I've ever been able to look at. It intersects at many aspects of a mine life. The mining microbiome can be used for better, so tools for biomining, mine waste remediation. We have enhanced monitoring and prediction tools. But on the flip side, when we ignore it, when we forget that these are biogeochemically charged systems, we can see the onset and propagation of acid mine drainage. We can see methylation of mercury, which has severe aquatic toxicity implications, ammonia production, it goes on and on and on. And so I'm really excited that I get to have these conversations with clients who are wonderfully open to these ideas, and they are intersecting our work every single day. So the traditional geochemist, whether we sort of like it or not, are moving into this space, and we have to change the way in which we see these worlds. And I'm grateful and fortunate that I have exposure to the biological world, so that I can have these conversations and we can move into this direction. But very long story short, I love multidisciplinary work. The mining world is an amazing place to continue that journey, and I learn every single day in it. And I recognize I ran through that very quickly, but that's really all the points I wanted to touch on.
A wonderful presentation, fulsome, broad, and when you talk about multidisciplinary, this is the only way to go, to integrate not only many specialties within the mining sector, but integrate all the specialties within the other sectors, because we cannot push the dial unless we take all that into account. We live in we're interdependent as humans, but also with the relatively narrow knowledge we have about nature, we have so much more to learn. Just the fact that in the last couple of years, as Alex said, the language, the conversation has changed. We're open to this multidisciplinary approach because we find that the simple, simplistic, reproducible solution just doesn't work. So Shilpa, can you please proceed with your presentation?
Okay, I think the previous conversation just like brought us like directly into what Tapua and I wanted to actually talk about, a multidisciplinary project. And just for some context, as you probably are all aware, South Africa is very mining dependent. And the problem that the country has been having the last few years is there are a lot of like mines which are not properly closed. And it's due to a lot of problems, mostly like legal, but also like accountability. But what happened now is that you have like a lot of degraded mine land, which, you know, is just like standing there with nothing. And also what happened is a lot of communities are left behind, because when mining happens in South Africa, usually it develops the surrounding communities. And once the mines are closed, then what happened to those communities? And this is what a team at UCT, at the University of Cape Town, is trying to work on. And our project is all about building post-mining economies and sustaining communities through regenerative agriculture of industrial crops. Next, please. So the way we envision this is like, okay, we want to work in a way that is environmental friendly and also conscious of like the climate change problems and also about the low carbon economy. And the way we want to approach this is we want a system that is regenerative in nature. And one way to do that is to use industrial crops. So you want to use like plants who have the ability to clean up the mine land, but also produce valuable biomass. So your plants such as your hemp, kanaf or bamboo, those are called industrial crops. But what is interesting about them is they can actually extract metals through their biomass. And this is actually called phytomining. So while also reclaiming the land, so essentially cleaning up the soil, they have very valuable biomass in the form of their fibers. So what we want to do is that we want to actually use those fibers to generate a multi-product fibrous economy. And in that way, you're targeting a system that is also cleaning up the land, but also create multiple value chain. And through that, we want to develop the green economies. And at the core is have an economy after mining that will sustain the communities. Next slide, please. And I just want to talk you through about like what this whole process is about. It's going to get a little bit technical, but this is where it gets interesting also. So I talked previously about phytomining. So we know the plants have those ability to extract metals, and it's actually really cool because it essentially offers you a unique opportunity to recover metals of value through the plant biomass. But this system is, however, solely focused on metal recovery. And like I mentioned before, is we want to harness the potential of the biomass. And the way we want to do that is we are proposing to do it in an innovative way by focusing on 2 stages. The first stage is we're going to focus on the fiber-based product because, as mentioned, the bamboo, hemp, and kanaf have valuable biomass, which have multi-product capabilities, and this can feed into various industries. So in the first stage, we focus on getting those fiber products as well as trying to recover your metals. Now, in the second stage, we recognize that after the cultivation, the metal recovery, and the fiber processing, we are left with a significant amount of residual plant biomass and also wastewater. And what we actually want to do is that we want to transform these resources through a biorefinery system such that we can get more product in our overall integrated system. And these products can be your biofuels, can be your bio-based chemicals, and also fit-for-purpose water. And if this project is successful, it will have the ability to impact a number of SDG goals, such as your clean water, your decent economic growth, your sustainable cities, your responsible consumption, climate change, and life on land. We are thus offering the mining industry a unique opportunity to adopt a circular approach to post-mine activities, such that they can use like plants as vehicles to establish a successor economy, which can actually deliver multiple economic, social, and environmental benefits to the surrounding communities. Next, please. And you might be thinking, okay, it's a very ambitious project, so how are you actually designing and planning this? A substantial amount of work is already underway in the form of our Resilient Futures Community of Practice project. We have been working together with economists, lawyers, mining companies, and mining communities so as to establish an enabling framework for our work to proceed. But just to summarize some of the key findings, we did find out that fibrous plants do indeed have phytoremediation properties, such that they are actually able to extract metals from the soil. But the soil and the water contaminants actually have a direct impact on the plant growth and the fiber quality, and also trying to integrate phytoremediation with producing fiber-based products along with other bio-based products will actually require dedicated experimental and field test work. But what our economics people also find out is from a macroeconomic and market perspective, South Africa is well positioned to diversify its fibrous economy, and it can do so in 2 ways. It can use a low complexity approach by just trying to use the bamboo fibers as like wood replacement, or a more complex approach using bast fibers like your hemp or kanaf. Those fibers are really good to make non-woven textile and biocomposite. And while initiating these industries are actually very challenging, we do believe that we can succeed in doing so through a well-established and targeted micro-industrial policy and enabling regulation. Next, please. We also had the opportunity to do some proof of study on actually an AngloGold mining site where we planted kanaf and bamboo on different plots of land, 5 meter square plots of land with different concentration of contaminants. And we actually just left the plants there without any irrigation, without any care, just to know how resilient they are. And we were actually very happy and surprised to see that after 10 years, they did indeed grow. I mean, they were not in the best shape, but that was without any irrigation, and that was without any actual like care. So what we did is like we harvested the biomass and then we sent them for analysis such that we can understand where the contaminants are, whether the fibers are being impacted, and that will inform us on our next step in our field study. Next slide, please. So where we're actually at is the phase 1 was all about working with different stakeholders, the economists, lawyers, and trying to get this framework. And we are very grateful that we got another round of funding to proceed further. So what we're doing is like we continue to develop this multidisciplinary project. We are bringing aboard like social scientists also, because the communities are at the heart of the discussion, and it's very important for them to understand what we're trying to do so that they can, uptake this new fibrous economy. And we are planning in doing so through like youth education and skill development, because you actually want to develop the people in the area so that they can transition from normal mining activities to agricultural and then manufacturing activities. And we started the field work, but that is very small scale, and we do want to scale up, and we want to establish living labs where we can actually, it's always good when you can demonstrate what you want to do. If visually you can like, okay, see this bamboo is growing, this plant is growing, and what do we do next? So it's all about trying to build the skill to enable that smooth transition. And obviously at the core is collaboration with stakeholders, because at the end of the day, we need this job creation opportunities for the country. And we do believe that working together as a team, and you guys were just discussing about before, it's a multidisciplinary work. And me and Tupiwa are chemical engineer, but our partners are economists, lawyers. So it's all about trying to bring our skills together and develop something that is very viable and, that is transferable in society also. So that's just a little bit about our project. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Shilpa. We'll give the microphone to Charles to give us his overview from what he's heard and what is the vision of the Mining Association of Canada. So what is clear from the conversation is the multidisciplinary approach. And also what I love from what Shilpa has stated in her work with Tapiwa, reaching out to other sectors. I have a question to ask Shilpa about what happens when with the phytogeoscience, the plants absorb the metals. If the metals are cadmium or arsenic and so on, what do you do with that? How do you dispose of it?
So there's like, okay, this is why it's very dependent on the site and then on actual doing like field test work. So we do believe that if the metals are, highly, those are like bad metals, you don't want them in actually your downstream products, in your textile, in your biofuel. You don't want those metals because they won't meet the product regulations. So the idea is still to have that metal recovery process at the start, before we actually do the downstream processing, so we can clean up the biomass, the maximum that we can. If all else fails, we can always use the biomass for energy generation.
Okay, thank you.
So the core idea is like to be as resource efficient as possible, such that all waste stream are actually feedstock to something else.
Okay, thank you. You've answered my question. Thank you very much. Okay, Charles, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and could advance to the next slide, please. So just a bit of context on my journey working in mining, because I think like a lot of others on the call today, I was raised to have a lot of respect for the environment, for nature. From some of the earliest memories are out camping and out on walking on nature trails, and that's stayed with me. I do a lot of wildlife photography, so the photo on this slide and the one on the last slide are actually my photos. They're not ones that I've downloaded off the internet. So it might seem like working in mining is going to require a compromise in my values, but I don't feel like I have ever compromised my values working in mining. My sort of starting point for kind of working in the industry is thinking, well, mining is essential. We use the products of mining every moment of every day. We might not even think about it, but to be able to eat, to be able to have a roof over our heads, to be able to have power, to be able to have clean water, we need mining. And certainly, to transition from a carbon-rich economy to a low-carbon economy, the products of mining are going to be absolutely essential. So we need mining, and recognizing that we can't get rid of it. So my goal has always been really to help try and make mining as safe and as environmentally responsible as possible. Next slide. So a little bit about what I do. I work for the Mining Association of Canada. So that's not a company, that's an industry association. So we represent the interests of the mining industry in Canada. So there's over 50 mining companies that are members of the association, and then a whole range of consulting companies and others that are also members of the association. And one of the things that MAC has developed that I think is really unique is a program to drive environmental and social sustainability for our members. So it's being applied in Canada and then in a number of other countries around the world, and that's the Towards Sustainable Mining program. So it covers things like tailings management, biodiversity conservation, water stewardship, climate change, Indigenous and community relationships, safety and health, communications and crisis management, preventing child and forced labor, and I've probably missed one in there somewhere. But it covers a very broad range of topics to really help us as an industry do better from an environmental and social perspective. And my focus since joining MAC in 2015 has been around tailings management, and MAC has been a leader in tailings management. We have performance expectations and guidance documents around tailings management that we've had now for almost 2 decades, or more than 2 decades in the case of the guidance. And those have been going under sort of a series of reviews over the last few years as the industry, as society has put increasing importance on tailings management. So getting tailings management right is just so important to protecting both people and the environment. And certainly we've seen what can happen when things go wrong and tailings facilities fail, but they can also have kind of long-term chemical impacts, causing water pollution in the downstream environments and things like that. So it's a very important piece of the work that MAC does, and a very important piece of what the industry is doing and needs to be doing. And it's something that I'm proud of my role in that, and I definitely think that's consistent with my values. Building on some of what Alex said earlier, the other major project that I've been involved in the last few years is the development of a guidance document for climate change adaptation for the mining sector. So it takes some of those same concepts. How do you work through a process of identifying what aspects of your operation or your supply chain are potentially vulnerable to changes in climate conditions, sort of distilling that down then to what are your risks associated with climate change, understanding what your projected future climate conditions could look like in terms of extreme weather events, in terms of changes in annual average conditions, and then from there understanding, okay, these are our areas where we need to focus from a risk management perspective, and then working through what's called a pathways approach of beginning to develop a path forward to be able to mitigate those potential impacts associated with climate change, but still allowing for flexibility down the road to be able to kind of fine-tune things as we get updated projections on future climate conditions and things like that, and then implementing those with an adaptive management approach. So it ties very much into a lot of these concerns and certainly has huge relevance, I think, both from an operating mine perspective and certainly from a closed mine perspective as well. Next slide, please. So how I got here. I have an undergraduate degree in geology. My first love was history, but I figured there probably weren't going to be as many job opportunities in history. So I went for geology, which is really just history over a much longer time scale anyways. But I had some really good summer jobs in mineral exploration, got to go some cool places, but realized that kind of field geology, that was not for me. So as I'm getting into my 4th year of my undergraduate program, I'm like, I don't really know what I want to be when I grow up. Because I wasn't going down that path I thought I was going down for the last 3 years. So I thought about going into teaching. That would have required some additional undergraduate studies. Circuitous path, I ended up in a master's program in geography. And from that, started learning more about environmental science and mining and the environment. Ended up completing a master's in earth sciences. And as part of that, I studied the geochemistry and water quality impacts of early 20th century silver mines. And I'm actually still involved in those silver mines. Those are actually some of the properties that Alex is responsible for through her company. And I'm still involved in an advisory group. So over 30 years later, I'm still involved in some of that work that was the basis, that kind of catalyst for getting me where I am now. Next slide, please. So finishing up my graduate work, I got hired by Environment Canada. For those, anyone outside Canada, that's the federal environmental regulatory agency in Canada. And I became a subject matter expert in mining. They were looking for a mining guy because they were going to be amending a set of regulations to do with mining. So I was involved in that. I've been involved in the development of the legal requirements, development and implementation of environmental monitoring programs, mainly focused on aquatic ecosystems, development of best practices for environmental management in mining, policy development, and then I also reviewed quite a number of environmental assessments of proposed mining projects. Those are massive sets of documents, they're not even single documents. So my reviews focus mainly on water quality and tailings management related components of those environmental assessments, which kind of provides that continuum from when I finally got into my graduate program to where I am now. Next slide, please. So some of the key messages, and I think there's some common themes that are coming out here in all of our presentations. Certainly, it's being immersed in it every day. It's just so clear that there's so many companies that are really doing a lot of good work. There's a lot of research and development happening. There's a lot of program implementation that's happening across the sector to really help to drive improved environmental performance. And that includes addressing GHG emissions, but also water quality and a whole range of other aspects where mining interfaces with the environment and can have environmental impacts, including the whole range of terrestrial impacts as well, like changes on deer and moose and caribou and other large mammals. And I think it's easy to kind of stereotype and think that people that work in mining, they're mostly engineers and geologists, but I think as we've heard today, there's a whole range of different professions that all come into play and all have a role to play. From a science perspective, certainly environmental science, biology, hydrogeology, geography, chemistry, computer science, and kind of list goes on from there. And then lawyers, the specialists in communications and community and Indigenous relationships, which is just such an important component of everything we do. Health and safety, finance, economics, human resources, and people that are specialists in providing training as well. And certainly there is a huge demand for people in a whole range of different occupations related to mining, both for companies, for consultants, and for the regulatory agencies. There's a lot of opportunities in mining, and I think that's going to continue, certainly just from a tailings management perspective alone. There's quite a substantial global shortage of qualified people to do that kind of work. So lots of opportunities. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Wow, that's brilliant. Your last slide was stunningly effective, and you included the regulators, which are an important component, because if the regulators don't understand the industry, how on earth can they write or enforce regulations? And to your point, you work with Environment Canada, you have various ministries, you have Natural Resources Canada, Environment, you have Fisheries. There is still, when we talk about integrative thinking, regulation is still on many silos, and that causes miscommunication, causes delays, and delays have not only an economic cost, but an overall cost for everything, because a delayed project is a project that is not restored faster either, and so on. There is so much that is going to be happening, so many changes that will be happening in the next few years, that I'm very pleased that the forum is bringing all these thoughts to the table. So young people who are, when I was in university, I still shouted at my careers teacher that basically threw some brochures in front of me, never really explained much, and I was none the wiser after talking to the careers teacher. I hope through the means of conference such as this one, young people can access ideas, and at the end of the forum we'll produce a booklet or an electronic book with the contact details for participants in the forum, for young people to be able to write to Shilpa or to Charles or to Alex and to say, I saw your presentation and I'm interested in this, or do you have any ideas about going in this direction or the other? A friend of Liam's at Brock, she's a student of archaeology. Every mining project needs an archaeological study. before you actually do any work. And people are completely unaware of these opportunities. With that, we have a few minutes left. What I want to do is, for 30 seconds, each of you could wrap up your thoughts as to messaging, and then we need to wrap in about 2 or 3 minutes. So, Alex.
All right. I think the biggest message that I have, and especially listening to today's presentations, is the commonality that I see is everyone is really passionate for what they do. And so I think that the best advice that I can give, and the thing that's kind of served me best in my career, is find something you love and then figure out how to fit that into what you're going to do. Because it's working can be a very long time if it's not something that you enjoy and that you're passionate about. And I think that there's always a way to be able to work it into something. And there's so many different careers in mining that, you know, can give so many different opportunities for learning and growing and sharing. And, you know, I'm really thankful for that opportunity. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about the future.
Thank you. Shilpa.
Thank you, everyone. That was a very insightful decision. I'm just going to echo what Alex was saying, is you can definitely work on your passion, and then also know that it is not like a black box. It is something that is linked. Like mining is not going away. With the energy crisis, with renewables, with electronics, technology, we still need metals. And we might as well do it in a good way, in an environmental friendly way, but also being conscious of the communities, the environment. And there's so much potential for young people to come into that space and bring in new ideas and then make a difference. Because sometimes we believe we cannot make a difference, but collectively, if we each do a little bit, then we are actually making a difference. So yeah, go for it, and then find something that's really, you know, that is passionate for you, and then you will end up making a difference.
Wonderful. Charles.
Yeah, just to echo those, I think it really is an opportunity to make a difference. It might not feel like that your first few years out of school as you're kind of finding your feet in a new career, a new profession, but the door begins to open as you sort of figure out where exactly you are. And build your knowledge and build your skill set. I think the other thing to keep in mind as a kind of one of the, I think what is rewarding from a personal perspective as well, is it's really an opportunity to get to go to some amazing places and see some pretty amazing parts of the world that otherwise you're not going to get to. And most people aren't going to get to. And if you like to see kind of out of the way places and to travel, it's also, I think, a great opportunity to do that, because you will have an opportunity to get to parts of this planet that most other people will never get to.
That is so true. What I like about listening to all three of your comments, there's an umbrella of caring about the world that underlies what we do. None of us, and nobody on this conference, I think, would deliberately set out to harm the environment or do something that is counterproductive. There is so much knowledge, we can only know a small part of it, but we're all pushing in the same direction. That's my sincere belief and the feeling I get from listening to everybody. And this is a unifying factor, whether we are at the letter A of the career spectrum to the zoology one, we're all really pushing in the same direction, desperately trying to help fix this world, make it better. And we have, as Charles has pointed out, there is an enormous demand for people in so many areas. There's not enough people to do the work, and the work is complex. It is not simple. So if you like simple, do something else, but it is very rewarding, because you'll put your soul into it and you'll get a lot back in terms of satisfaction. With those words, I think we can sum up. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful for your time. Safe travels, Alex. I don't know where you're flying to, but all the very best, and thank you for doing it. And Shilpa, please send my regards to Tapiwa, who she was with us in spirit. and we'll connect at the end. I'll be communicating with all of you, and then we'll see where we take this experiment forward.